Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Ferris Does Whatevs. Um, I'm doing a Whatev stream because I just don't feel like working on anything. And I've been on vacation and I got back last Tuesday. Was jet lagged as hell. So didn't stream last week, and I think I'm not streaming next week either. I hate to admit it, but I don't remember why. Um, this is my life. Oh yeah, it's NDC. Thanks, Bab. Going to NDC. It's a conference here in Oslo, and the company I work for, GraphCore, has a booth, and so I'll be a booth babe for half a day. But then the party is that night, so going to that. That'll be really fun. And I thought I should stream today, but then I thought about like what I wanted to do, and there's a project I want to work on that I don't want to stream, and then there's could continue on the TA stuff, which I want to do, but I just didn't feel like it today. Whenever I'm really tired, like anxiety is something I struggle with, and whenever I'm really tired, it gets a lot worse. And unfortunately, that really seems to coincide with traveling across the Atlantic. So I was really anxious in the start of my vacation. I was really anxious coming back, and I'm still kind of feeling it, even though I'm getting back into the groove of things. So getting better. But today, I just wanted to have a chill day. So that's what we're doing. I figured I'm just going to turn this on and we'll find something to talk about because I don't know, I like talking about things. Anyway, hi to guys in the chat. I'll comment on 8 little bits, and thank you guys both so much for subscribing. Especially subscribing so consistently, both of you guys. That really means a lot. CPDT, Norm, Freeful, WhisperTube, good to see you guys. So here we are, just chilling. Totally unrelated, I've been listening to a ton of drum and bass lately. And particularly an artist called Urban Dawn, who just came out with a single recently called Come Together. That is so cool. I'm going to drop a Spotify URI here. I'm a big fan of this track. This is my liquid list, my drum and bass list on Spotify. I can share that as well. Just so you guys can get the full vibes, right? Oh, by the way, CPDT. I need to do something really quick. I keep noticing this and then not fixing it because I've been on vacation. In the README of Wavesaber, I misspelled your name. So we're just going to fix that. Oh, I got to sign in. I'm glad you've noticed. Actually, I'm not glad you noticed, but... yeah, total typo. So I need to log in and fix that. I will do that. Thanks for the link. I will totally link that. Good day to tune in, I guess. Need my 2-factor shiznit. Hey, Try Guy. Hey, Eheek Switch. Okay, here we go. CPDT, delta time, not time delta. And then the repo. Bam balam. Yeah, I typically put those URIs in the browser. Extra hug, so comma, for the reference. Oh, guys, one of the things that we did on our little vacation was we went and saw my family. And I've mentioned it several times that I have a VIC-20 that's in flawless condition. And I have it now. And it totally works. Let me do some shiznit here. I might disappear as I set something up here. Or maybe not. Where's me? Face cam. What? So much Ferris. More Ferris than your body has room for. That sounds really gross, but it's just a Power Thirst reference. Keep it PG. I don't know. Hopefully that's good enough resolution and shit. But just a sec. Oh boy. This thing is awesome. So this is the box. Let me turn off my green screen stuff actually, because it's just gonna mess us up. I'm already so flickery. I need some TAA. Trey Guy, do you know if there's a usable constraint-based programming lib for Rust? I'd like to use something to find the best cycle-perfect instruction sequence for a 2600 demo I'm working on. I'm actually not familiar with constraint-based programming. So I feel like I can't answer that question, but I'm really curious as to what you mean by that. I literally don't remember how to turn off my green screen. Filters, that should probably do it. Chroma key, there we go. Okay, that helps. All right. So this is my VIC-20. The box is a little beat up. A little story about how I got this. I got this in 2010. I had gone to local thrift store in my hometown. And I don't remember why I was there. But happened to go there. And just like, this was in 2010, so already a lot of this retro stuff was kind of hard to find by then. But I thought, anyway, I'll just look in their little gaming computer section, whatever. And I saw this, and they had it there for $75, which for me at 18 years old was too much money. By a lot, actually. So I decided not to get it. Was kind of disappointed because this thing is actually in flawless condition. I'll show you guys that in a sec. Anyway, went back 2 weeks later just to look again, and I noticed it was missing from their like games and computer section, and I was kind of bummed about that. But as I was leaving, I just happened to like look over, and on the far wall in this store there was a clearance section. And this box was over there. And they had marked it down to $20. So I totally bought it. And it's been sitting in basements and attics with my parents ever since then. Other than, of course, when I hooked it up at the time. And now finally we stuffed it in a suitcase, padded it with bubble wrap and a bunch of extra clothes, and got it here to Norway. So super happy to be reunited with this again. And I think, honestly, this thing must have been sitting in someone's, like, basement or attic for years. Like 30 years. Almost 40 years, actually. This is almost 30 years when I got it, because it's just in amazing condition. So, opening the box, we have a couple games. And again, the boxes here are kind of beat up, but the games themselves are just in flawless condition. I'll pull some of those out just because this is so cool to me. Still have like original manuals and like little ads and everything that comes in all this stuff. It's one of the games. It almost looks like there's yellowing on it when I hold it up to the camera, but there's none at all. It's in perfect shape. It smells new. This thing's awesome. Avenger. These cartridges are like twice the width of a C64 cartridge or so, and not quite as deep. I guess they go in the back of the machine in more or less the same spot. Anyway, the machine itself is what I want to show you guys. It's still in like plastic and styrofoam, and I don't take it out very often because I haven't had it. And I think that plastic actually has had the most say in keeping this thing in really good shape. But this thing is just flawless. I mean, if you guys haven't seen a VIC-20 before, it's a C64. Like, it's the same case, but of course the colors are a little different. Original label back here. No wear or tear at all. Like, this thing is just brand new. I have no idea if anyone ever actually used this thing, because it just is in way too good shape. If I can get the logo. It's all way too bright. I can just turn off this. That helps, actually. I should do one of those like unboxing videos with this thing. It's just in beautiful shape. Hooked it up to my PWM the other day. Works perfectly. But of course it does, because I haven't touched it in 10 years. But yeah, really happy to have this sort of in my collection again. Yeah, that's right, guy. That is a major disappointment that they don't put rainbows on computers like that. One of the most charming things about it, too, is all these manuals. I'll try and put this somewhere not in the sun. So the first thing that this comes with, also in perfect shape, is this friendly computer guide. And this is written so well with like these little bubbles, how to program and stuff. So cool. And again, just no wear on this at all. This is brand new, which is so sick. And then there's this Datasoft Inc. like feedback card. Some Commodore magazine subscription card thing. A real computer for the price of a toy is apparently this marketing blurb with a bunch of like pictures of games and stuff. And then I love this. This is a VIC-20 price list. So it's like different accessories and whatnot. Shipping specifications, books and manuals, all kinds of stuff. So cool. Yeah, I love these old manuals went this much in depth, and they still like made a lot of effort to try and make it user friendly. Hey, Evil. So yeah, overall I think it's really cool. that I was able to get this in such good shape. There is, however, one major problem with it, which is or isn't a problem depending on who you ask. And that's that it's NTSC, because it is a model that's from the US. So that means it doesn't run any European demos, mostly due to timing differences. That's a bit unfortunate, but what can you do? So I may never actually make a demo for it either, but who knows? We'll see. You know, there's not enough things that I want to make demos on. As far as I know, there's no way to change it to PAL. The typically, or at least in the C64, which is the only real reference point I have, is like the video chip in particular is actually a different chip entirely. So there's like the actual video signal, the NTSC or PAL video signal comes directly from the chip. It's not like a clean signal that then gets converted to the TV signals. And that alone made it a big problem. And as far as I know, the VIC-20 has the same kind of issue. So as far as I know, you can't actually mod it. And honestly, this thing is in such good condition that I wouldn't want to. If I had a shitty one, I would love to do that if it were possible. But I suspect it's not possible, and I'm not going to do that with this machine. But happy to have it anyway. I also got some other stuff set up these days. Yeah, that's all the hint you get. I actually kind of want to look to see if that's possible, but I don't think it is. No, that's not what it was, Trey Guy. Yeah, the other thing with these things is that they have different crystals on them for PAL and NTSC, because the timing of the entire computer is based around producing that video signal. Of course, you have a different kernel ROM as well, but I don't think that those would actually be different enough to really matter, I would imagine. But yeah, it looks like it does have different VIC chips. It says they eventually cost reduced the board, where they had a single board. But I don't know if mine is one of those or not. I haven't even opened it because one of the issues with these old Commodore computers is that the plastic tends to not have aged very well. And so if you're screwing and unscrewing the case too often, the little cylinders inside that the screws go into will just break off. They'll basically crumble. And that's what happened to my first C64. So I don't like to open the other ones very much. So I don't think I've ever opened this one. Maybe I did in 2010, but I don't think I did. Because I didn't have the computer for very long either before I moved to Boston to go to school. So I didn't spend much time with it. But yeah, it does actually look like if you get a new VIC chip and make some other small modifications, it can be possible to convert from PAL to NTSC, but not going to do that. Hey, Dura 2. Yeah, I did have a nice break. We did a lot. A lot of sightseeing. A lot of just chilling. It was good. And I came back and I wrote a bunch of notes on a bunch of like GitHub issues and stuff. Just things that went through my head. But I haven't addressed like anything. I haven't sat down and written any code since I got back, other than at work, of course. But even then, I've been mostly pairing with people on stuff and helping onboard some new guys. So actually, I haven't written much code at all since I've been back. I didn't bring a laptop specifically for this trip. Yeah, I'm enjoying the new job a lot. I started at GraphCore in March, so I've been there for a few months now, and it's absolutely excellent. I can't talk too much about what I'm doing, other than what's on the website, but it's very exciting, and I'm enjoying it very much. And I'm very happy because I don't have that much machine learning experience, but the experience I have has to do with low-level programming and GPUs. And both of those happen to be really relevant. And actually compression, stuff I've done for compression has ended up being really relevant as well. Mostly a lot of the terminology. So that's been really cool. And I really like learning new things. One of my favorite expressions is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I find I'm very motivated when I'm kind of in the deep end of just having to learn a lot of new stuff. I think that's really stimulating. So it's been really good. So you're learning Vulkan without having really been a graphics guy? I eat Dixie Wrecked. That's a fun thing to say. How's it going? Yeah, I think it's awesome actually, Dura, too, that you're learning Vulkan on the job. I haven't written anything in Vulkan myself. I haven't sat down to learn it, other than just looking over the API and discussing it with some friends of mine. Yeah, my name comes from the movie. And I guess you could consider this my day off. I mean, Vulkan's really cool because it gets you lower level access to the hardware, more or less. And that can be really nice if you're going to take advantage of it. Of course, it also takes more boilerplate code to set things up. But if you're into that and you're into learning like what you actually need, I think it gives you a more clear picture of what a GPU actually is these days than even modern like DirectX or OpenGL will give you. That's a great pun. I've never done any metal either. Which is probably not something I'll ever touch directly. I considered doing Vulkan for our demo engine, but I just wasn't able to come up with any really concrete benefits for the things that I wanted to do. At this point, maybe we could have had like less abstractions for things in the tool. I think things get a bit more homogeneous with Vulkan, but it doesn't really matter, like buffer types and whatnot. So whatever. Yeah, it works with GL, and I was more familiar with GL too. And we end up with less API calls, which at 64K is not going to matter too much. Like I can list it as an advantage, but it doesn't really feel like a big one. But yeah, I could probably squeeze out more perf, but that's generally not a problem. I think Elysian was like had a lot of draw calls, and that's mostly due to laziness. And some of those probably could have been made a little faster, or at least could have been dispatched better. But eh, it really doesn't matter. Most of the optimization that we can do that's worthwhile, we can do with OpenGL too. Especially now that especially with like compute shaders and shader storage buffers, you have the right abstractions to just kind of move around memory almost however you want all the time forever. It's great. So if there's something like that you want to pre-calc with some shader stage and then use it in some other shader stage, it's like you have a lot of freedom to do those kind of optimizations, which is kind of what gets you the most wins anyway, I think. Yeah, GL totally has extensions for a lot of stuff. Generally, like we use GL 4.5 in our, or is it 4.3 in our demos? I don't remember now. Would need to look. Hey, you're in the German. Oh, that is cool, Drew, too. Like, are you doing actual compute on CPU, or? Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're doing 4.3 in our demos. So I think it was just the minimum version that we needed for compute, and then haven't needed anything else beyond that, so. Oh, that's cool, Drew, too. ICP-based implementation of the GLES and DirectX 9 graphics APIs. Cool. That's very cool. Nice. That's a really cool project. The stuff I'm working on right now will probably never be open source. Very cool. One of the things I'm working on is, I'll just say it's for revision next year. And I'm starting way early compared to what I normally do, but you kind of have to with the kind of project that it is. And I'm still on the fence with whether or not I want to stream about it. But I definitely want to like write little bits of blog post as I go along that are probably going to be released as like a write-up at the end, but a lot of work. But my head's in a really cool space right now with that stuff, because it's like I'm doing really low level stuff at work that translates into me thinking really low level at home too. And the particular platform that I'm targeting needs a lot of very clever applications of very distinct hardware. So I've been really enjoying doing some of that. I think I found some really clever stuff that I haven't seen before. But there have been some prods released recently that have done some things on some of the same lines. And I won't say much more than that, but I'm very excited to see that some other people have thought similarly, but not as deeply as I have. I've also been considering releasing our 64K packer, at least just putting out binary releases. Because virus scanners already hate it anyway. And I'm not going to be the guy to run down or to run and chase down all the virus scanner authors and have them whitelist stuff, I'm not gonna bother. I can talk about the tech, but I can't really talk about the tech without revealing the platform. I'll just say it because I've been saying it to people around me recently anyway. I'm working on a Super Nintendo demo. And it's one of those things where the approach, like I've done 2 Super Nintendo demos before, and I did a lot of tech for making that cool, like 5 years ago. If you guys have seen the breakdown videos I did for the last 2, especially the Smash It demo, you'll see a lot of the tech that I'm going to continue working on. But there's a lot of hardware features that I haven't used on the Super Nintendo that I want to use in the next one, and a lot of clever applications of those hardware features that I've thought about for years at this point, that I think are going to be really cool. And the main reason I'm doing it for Revision is because I always knew that for Revision 2020 I wanted to do a Super Nintendo demo because it's the 30-year anniversary of the system. And from about 2008 to like 2014, when I was doing demos on the SNES, I always wanted to do like a really big Super Nintendo demo. And I was actually worried that someone would come up with something like really good after I did, because the 2 demos I did in 2014, they're okay. Like I think they're some of the best demos on the system that have been released, but I'm not that thrilled about them. But I always knew that I could do like a really big one, but I just never really had, I guess, the drive to do one again for a long time. And since then, like there have been some small releases, but just nothing on the right kind of scale. And I have a feeling there won't be until this one's released, but we'll see. And one of the reasons why I have to start so early is because, like with old school demos, especially ones with weirder hardware, and I would consider the SNES weirder hardware for a myriad of reasons, but you really need a lot of lead time, because even if you have effect ideas and you kind of know exactly how they're going to be implemented on the hardware, the actual implementation itself still can take a lot of time. Old school demo coding is just as much about data preparation as it is the actual code that runs on the system, and you have to get very clever with both to do something that's impressive enough. and not just the code, obviously there's the music and the graphics and everything, and we need to get more people on board. So I need to get some proof of concepts relatively early so that we can pass this around to some key people and get them on board as well. Yeah, ASM coding, and also just like figuring out, like, there's an effect idea that I have that uses a particular hardware feature, and preparing the data for it is going to be like a lot of work, like designing the animation that I want to do with it, and then the way that that's going to be prepared, and then the way that gets from the prepared data to the actual hardware and making that work is actually the straightforward part. I think that's kind of the fun thing. Yeah, I'm using the JIT that I wrote 5 years ago. Yeah, exactly, Trey Guy. Kind of working backwards from the hardware capabilities and seeing, like, what's this feature? How can I use that? Come up with an effect that can kind of show that off. With the Super Nintendo demo, especially, like, so I've never done Mega Drive coding before, but it has the same CPU as the Amiga 500, and it's running at the same speed. And so I can imagine that taking some Amiga effects and then porting them to Mega Drive, a lot of them would carry over. Of course, that's definitely not true 100% of the time, but like if you're doing a polyfiller, you would do it roughly the same way, I can imagine. Obviously the copper stuff ends up being pretty different, and SNES actually works to our advantage in that capability because of HDMA. Nice, Havoc. Um, but the Super Nintendo were really gimped by the CPU. I would say that the two things that make, like, I'll be honest, I don't enjoy coding on the SNES. I don't enjoy 65816 assembler at all. I don't think it's fun, and I don't. It's not just the CPU. Like, the CPU is basically too slow. That's kind of the first major problem. Even like it'll essentially run at two speeds, and those speeds are entirely determined by the bus speed. So the SNES has like the 65816 CPU, which is this upgraded 6502 that has a few nicer instructions, but mostly it has these 8 and 16-bit modes where you have these two flags in as part of the processor status, and one of them determines if the accumulator is 8 or 16 bits, and the other one determines if the two index registers are 8 or 16 bits. And you often have to like flip back and forth between these, because certain registers need to be written as 8-bit reads or writes, or 16-bit reads or writes, and there's several registers where it's like you have a 16-bit value, but it's a write twice register, so you write to the same location, but you do it first the low value and then the high value, and like so you end up switching a bit. And if you're doing like performance critical code, that can be really annoying. And of course, you only have the 3 registers, which is also really, really annoying. And the CPU just runs too slow. So the main system bus, there's actually 2 address buses and a data bus, and I believe it's to accommodate different ROM speeds, but by default, the system bus is, or the CPU is essentially running at 2.58 megahertz. And you can change, I think that's like 6 master cycles or 8 master cycles per read or something. I don't remember what it is. And then you can change the bus speed to operate at 3.58 megahertz by flipping a certain bit. And then if you access a certain bit in the bus registers, and then if you access the bus via certain banks, it will allow you to access at the higher speed. And I think that drops it down to like 6 master cycles per memory access or something. And that totally determines your CPU speed. And even then, though, you've gotten up to 3.5 megahertz, which is half the speed of the 68K in the Amiga 500. And you have like an 8 or what? How many registers did the Amiga 500 have? Was it like 8 address registers and 16 general purpose registers or something? Even if it's half that, like, it's really annoying. I mean, there are some really nice things about the SNES hardware. Like, the video hardware is really, really capable, and so is the audio hardware. And the audio hardware is... So, I'm jumping around a lot, but I would say the second really annoying thing about coding effects on the Super Nintendo is that the video memory is far away. You can only access it through a couple ports and only in certain parts of the frame. In fact, you can only access it either during force blank or V blank for just the video memory. You can access the color memory in more times in the frame, and I actually don't know about the object memory, what the rules are for that. But it's far away. You can only access it either via invoking DMA or through these ports where you have to write the address to one port and then write the data to another port, and it's really annoying. Yeah, the Mega Drive also has a Z80 that can be used parallel to 68K. I believe that's mostly used for running music. And the SNES has a complete, like, separate CPU and memory and everything for doing audio, so you can just kind of fire and forget. But then if you want to do any like streaming, then that becomes way more of a burden than it would have been otherwise. Because you have to, the way you communicate is you have 4 registers on either side, and you can write to them, and then you can read that value on the other side in both cases. It's actually even separate clock domains. So like it's, the timing is not guaranteed, and you have to do, of course, it'll be different for NTSC and PAL because the audio unit runs on the same clock in both PAL and NTSC systems. And I want to target both PAL and NTSC in this case. And so you're like, the ratios of those clocks is different for PAL and NTSC. And then at the same time, like, you have to essentially do your own handshaking protocol with these 4 registers on either side. So it's just really kind of nasty, but I don't know. But the hardware itself is really, really capable. And yeah, I think I think even if you just look at the amount of demos that have been released for the different platforms, I think there's a reason why there's more Mega Drive demos than there are SNES demos. And I don't think it has to do with like old school console rivalry, which I hate, by the way. Like that produces no value. I don't think it's fun. Like the Super Nintendo versus Mega Drive stuff, I just do not give a shit at all. And I think the only reason why they're even compared in the first place is because they were obviously competing in the same market. They were released at the same time. But I think hardware wise, they're both extremely different. And I honestly think that in terms of like doing CPU based effects, the Mega Drive has a huge advantage. So doing like classical demo scene stuff, I think the Mega Drive is in a much better position to do that than the Super Nintendo. And I don't mean to like downplay the efforts of people doing Mega Drive demos at all. Like there's obviously some incredible Mega Drive demos that deserve so much praise, you know. I'm more just saying that the systems are quite different. So for Super Nintendo, the approach that I've done mostly is focusing on like how can we do clever application of the existing hardware and how can we drive that as best as we can. More so than, for example, riding the fastest polyfill or whatever. The other thing that I think you hear a lot with Super Nintendo stuff is, of course, there were a lot of expansion chips in the cartridges, and I'm also ignoring all of that stuff. Not because I don't think that's cool, but because it's not the kind of development that I want to do. And I think it's also nicer if you can just give someone a ROM that's also capped at 4 megs, and they can just run it on their stock SNES without breaking any carts or anything. So I don't know. I think that's cool. Yeah, that is true that the Amiga doesn't have a tile mode. But the tile modes can actually be really nice for certain demo effects. For example, one of the effects that I did that I like to talk about a lot was in the C64 4K that we did a couple years ago. There's this zooming plasma, and all of the X zooming is actually done by just changing some tile indices, and then the Y zooming is done with hardware tricks. And that combination works really, really well. Better than it would have in a chunky mode, for example. But I guess if you were to do the same... I actually don't know how the video... like the pixel data... I'm not very familiar with Amiga, but I don't know how like the pixel data pointers... I don't know if those can be changed by the copper mid-scan line, or how that's buffered. Because I guess you can emulate a tile mode by doing that. And so then, instead of putting tile indices that the hardware will read, you're putting data pointers into these copper lists, I would imagine. So it kind of ends up being the same thing, I guess. But I'm not really sure. So I think most of the effects that I will do in the SNES demo and that I've been working on so far are mostly about like well-prepared data that uses the hardware really well or in clever ways, which means there's going to be, the ROM is going to be fairly large. And then there's going to be, of course, some different ways to utilize the CPU and some other things too. Like it'll be a mixture of a lot of real-time generated data and pre-calc data put together in such a way that I think it'll feel really modern. And the tooling that I did 5 years ago mostly covers what I want to do. But there's going to be a lot of bug fixes and more features that I have to expose through that tooling that will make it do everything that we need. Someone asked earlier, what is this? Do you know how much time a week, a month you plan on spending on SNES coding? I don't. I know that I'm going to spend a lot of time probably in the last like 6 months before the party. It'll probably be one of my only side projects. Before that, I just need to spend maybe a couple good Saturdays just like really getting into it and getting some things off the ground compared to where I am now. And then I think once the ball is rolling, then yeah, things will become a lot easier. Gratified? No, I haven't seen that. That's so cool. Like using GPIO to like read the data or what? But yeah, I guess it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that I'm doing a SNES demo anyway, because I've talked about it a lot, and I want there to be more people doing Super Nintendo demos. So I guess gotta lead the way a bit more. There was a small intro release at Outline that I guess did some Vector Bob stuff with some clever use of the Mode 7 registers for calculating Bob positions. So I think that's how the hardware multiplier works. I'm not sure. I don't remember. And there was a couple Super Nintendo things released at Revision. Oh man, Zokwar, that sounds nasty. Over here I have what I have. I can't really show it, but I have my JVC PWM, and then on top of it I have both a PAL and a NTSC Super Nintendo. And then I have a Super EverDrive that's connected via USB to my machine that I can pop between the two systems. So relatively quickly I can test on both. But generally again, for compatibility reasons, like testing on both is actually not something I will do most of the time. Essentially, I'll target an NTSC machine and then it'll work fairly naturally on the PAL one. Yeah, N64 is actually a system I would love to do a demo on as well, but not for a very long time. Also, Virtual Boy is an obvious choice. And there's a lot of tooling before that's viable, though. But my real hope with the Super Nintendo demo is, first of all, I want to do something ambitious, and I want it to have a lot of wow factor on its own. But I hope that people who have done SNES coding are going to scratch their heads on a couple of these effects, and I know that they will for a couple of the ones that I'm already working on. And I think there will be some people too that are just like, oh, a lot of this is pre-calc, and it's just like, well, sure, but the presentation is so good and the animation is just so good that even if all of it's pre-calc, it's still a lot of work to do. So I think people will like it. Trey says Poet doesn't even have entry for ColecoVision. That seems strange. Oh, it's probably under Wilds, I guess, because I have seen a couple ColecoVision demos, but not many. Cool. I'm glad you're excited, Evil. I think it'll be cool. Zokwar, I might restart the N64 emulation streams. I always wanted to. And the thing I always would say was that, like, once the Virtual Boy emulator was kind of at 1.0, then I wanted to do that, and I still feel that way. So maybe after that. And I'm really going to scope down, like, the ambition for the N64 emulator. Because after doing Virtual Boy, and I mean, that was really fun, but I spent a lot of time tracking down bugs that I'm not really sure how important they are. Cool, Gramify. Thanks for the link. We'll definitely check that out. But yeah, back when I did SNES demos in 2014, I had spent much of 2013 doing tooling. So like did my own tracker, did my own assembler, which that was stupid. I should have just used WLA, but it was a fun project at the time. I was learning a lot about parsers and compilers, so I made this multi-architecture assembler out of the assembler I had done for the Game Boy demo that we did in 2012. So by the time 2014 came, it was mostly about like I came up with this tool that would help me load stuff into VRAMs. Like I would still do CPU based effects, but then I would do a lot of the data moving between parts would be automated or automatable or animatable, and some parameters to the effects would be animatable from like Rocket as well. And when I came up with that design and started implementing it, I came up with this kind of JIT thing. And then by the time the Gathering rolled around that year, I wanted to do a demo, but it was like 2 weeks before the Gathering. I didn't really have anything, so I was just like, I wonder if I can use this JIT thing to just do compressed video. And then that totally worked. And I think a lot of people really liked that demo, which was new. And then that summer, I spent a lot of time just kind of saying like, oh, this actually worked really well for video compression. I wonder if I can just kind of like sort of compress hardware states in the same way, which is just kind of a better application of the same technique. So Smash It as well was this where the whole thing was done with this system that I meant to just move around VRAM and stuff. But it works so well and it was so fun to do that it just kind of made sense to keep going with that. And the next one is going to be much more hybrid. And so I still get a little bit irked with the people that complain that new was just a video or whatever, because first of all, it was compressed and that's difficult. And it's not the best compression technique or decompressor that you could make for that system by any means, but like, it was never meant to be. It was just something cool that I made, you know? But I guess, I mean, I get it, because people don't see the tooling that went into it, and they don't see the ideas, like the trajectory that my mind was on when making these. They only see the artifact, and the artifact is not that much CPU code and a lot of pre-calc, and for some people, that's not a demo to them. And that's a whole other like philosophical discussion that I've thought a fair bit about, and I just think it's kind of an arbitrary line that you draw somewhere. And I think even if you want to do a demo where you have a 3D object, and let's say you fill all the polygons on the system itself, or you do something where you only do polygon fillers for tiles where there's edges of polygons, but for other tiles you just do solid color. If you're doing that and you're already pre-calculating vertex positions, or you're pre-calculating which triangles you draw, or you're doing clipping and stuff as pre-calc, which you often would do for one of these systems, it's really not that far off from doing video compression. In fact, doing video compression would be a really good way to do that kind of effect in a lot of cases. And so I don't really see the distinction, is kind of my point. Like you come up with a data format and a way to interpret that format that's targeted at the hardware you're doing in order to achieve a certain effect. And whether or not you're using ideas that are similar to or just full-on video compression doesn't really make a difference to me, conceptually speaking. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like at some point you kind of draw an arbitrary line, and I choose to draw it like pretty far, and even then I don't consider video compression cheap a lot of the time. but I can understand how people see that differently. But yeah, I'm glad you guys liked the new demo, because I had a lot of fun making that. And in a way, even though, so first of all, I should say that the response to that was overwhelmingly positive. So like I spend a very disproportionate amount of time thinking about the negative feedback, but but even then, I just think they're wrong. But I mean, I get it, and I think that ultimately, like, the people that get mad about that are the people that feel like it's cheap, or that they feel like they're tricked or something, and obviously that makes people angry. if they feel like they're lied to or something. And in a way, I feel like, okay, that just means that the compression I did for that was really good, because then people didn't know that it was even compressed. I think people didn't think of that very critically because you couldn't tell. You can tell, like if I showed you the original OpenGL stuff and the thing, you can see where the artifacts are, but they're hidden. I think I talked about that in the new breakdown stream. Yeah, so that's another thing that I do agree with, that when they're a bit more artificial when they depend on storage devices that didn't exist in the day, and I think that's a distinction that I would agree with too. Like New, for example, worked out of a 4 megabyte cartridge, which was considered pretty normal when this NES was new, or at least in its heyday. It wasn't uncommon to see 4 megabyte games. I think I had a big how do I word this? When the Atari VCS scene started doing a lot of 16K and 32K demos, I remember feeling a little bit cheated by that at the time, to be honest. And I felt a bit cheated because like that's 16 or 32K doesn't sound like a lot, but I don't think there were any 32K VCS demos that were actually or games that were actually released when that was a viable platform, and I think there were a couple 16K cartridges or something, and they also had like extra music hardware or whatever. I'm probably wrong about those details, but that's like a lot of memory for compared to what that system would have usually, like what a game would have usually taken up for that system. Most of them were 4 or 8 kilobytes. And I was a little bit irked by that because I thought, okay, that's kind of cheap, but at the same time I was also irked by it because I thought like, man, I wish I had done that. Because around like 2011, before that kind of happened, I had a bunch of effect ideas that would use that, and never ended up doing that because I thought people would think it was cheap, and that turns out nobody did. And now we have really good VCS demos because of it, which I'm not really one to complain about that. But that's one of those cases where like then it is more storage than you typically would have seen. A lot more actually than you would have seen games using at the time. But at least the SNES demos I've done have not gone over the 4 meg limit, and I don't ever plan to. I think there's a couple 6 meg SNES games that were released at the time. Maybe in Japan only. Like Star Ocean is one that comes to mind. I don't know if they got any bigger. Yeah, that's true, Trey Guy. People didn't complain when State of the Art came out because you could feel the effort. The hard part was in tooling and filming. Absolutely. And for the new, I would compare new to State of the Art because they're completely different systems and completely different times. And I think State of the Art was much more groundbreaking, obviously. But like the similarity there is of course the same thing, where it's like the tooling is the effort. For New and Smash It was all the tooling was where all that technical effort really went. And that's also why if you just look at the code in the cartridge, it's just like, oh, this is just streaming data. Yes, it is, but determining what data to stream for every frame is a hard problem. And it was really fun making a solution for that. That's really what it came down to, is that it was a really fun technical problem to solve. I didn't know that a lot of the Atari 8-bit scene is using RAM expanders as well. Oh, I didn't realize Cute Nice. I forgot it had the expansion chip for that as well. Because I'm pretty sure was that mostly audio, or was it graphics too that was compressed, or was it just general stuff? I'm not familiar with the SDD one. Trigger, I wish people wouldn't complain, but maybe it's because in 2012 I put out a 4K ROM for VCS, which had some music and a rotating wireframe cube. And of course, the wireframe cube was all pre-calc. And people did complain about that. And it's probably because in the README, I more or less jokingly said, like, yeah, world first, wireframe cube, whatever. But it was 32 by 32, which you can't actually fit in video memory or in RAM on the VCS, which is, I think, the fun part. As I thought about doing like Bresenham to like prepare a lot of this stuff. And I guess you could do like some of the frame that way, and then you could have gotten more data into a 4K ROM. But as you say, like, you can't really do much more than just displaying those with sprites if you want that resolution. I think are there VCS demos that are doing 6 I call them sprites, but I guess they're players, but like 6 of the high resolution graphics in one line. Are there demos that are doing that? Because if you do 32 pixels wide, then that's 4 of them. And to do that, you have player 1 and player 2, and you have to alternate, and you have to set the data for all those. You don't really have enough time to do more than that, I guess. I don't think it gets wider than that. Gotcha, cute, nice. I mean, the VCS is fun just because of how stupid the hardware is. Like, it's genius hardware design in terms of being really minimal. But the two things that I just think are ridiculous is, one of them is the audio, because it's like like a 30 kilohertz oscillator, and then to get pitch for different oscillators, you set a divide value. So essentially like a counter upper bound that these counters count to, that run on the 30 kilohertz clock. So like none of the notes are in tune at all. And then the other thing I think is funny is, like, when you want to position the sprites, you don't write a register to what the X position is going to be. What you have to do is you have to do a write and then to a specific register, and the timing of when you do that write with respect to the horizontal scan line, that's where the sprite will be drawn on the next scan line. And then the Y positioning is done entirely by enabling or disabling the sprite, because on the VCS, the hardware itself doesn't know about a video frame. It only handles just as much for the horizontal parts of the frame, and then exposes registers to do the video and horizontal blanking signals. So you have to do all that from the CPU, which I think is really cool. But it's not really a system I want to code for that much anymore. But yeah, at least if you want like the highest resolution graphics you can get on VCS, as far as I know, is the sprite graphics. And as far as I know, as far as I can remember, I've only seen 32 pixels wide for that. Yeah, that's exactly it, Trey Guy. That's what it was, because you have to reposition the two as well. And so I think the only ones that I've seen are only doing 32 pixels wide. You're right that you can totally combine all those as well, but you wouldn't change those. You wouldn't have unique pixel values for all the pixels that you could change every scan line. You could probably get clever and use those in such a way that you could like only change certain ones every scan line and come up with like a really crazy display routine, but it becomes difficult. And so if you wanted to do like a wireframe cube like I did, if you wanted to do like less pixels tall, then I think you could totally do that, because you can just do like Bresenham, and you could do like, I think even the one that I did, because it didn't have that many frames, was updating every few frames. So like you could actually double buffer it, but then you'd only have room for like 10 lines high or something. But you could do that. You could double buffer it and then actually calculate the image, and that would work just fine. And you could do that for like half the frames, and then the other half could be pre-calc'd. So like you could fit more frames if you wanted to do that same effect. So you could make a smoother one, for example, without just all precalc. Which still I haven't seen anyone do. Like when I put that out, I remember a particular comment was just like, "Oh, you took my idea, but I have better ideas on how to do this." And that's great. That's great that they have better ideas, but I haven't seen it. And I would kind of like to see that. Because it should be possible to do better than that. The Amigos release, yeah. The Apple monitor stand, exactly. So much compute in that stand. Not much less than a VCS. But yeah, I think the VCS hardware is just really cool in its minimalism. I think it's really clever. Especially because it's literally that one chip that handles all video and audio. And then off the shelf components for the CPU, and then what's it called, the Riot, the IO plus RAM plus timer chip. Because that's also what I played around with at that time, was using the timer chip so that you could, at the beginning of the frame, like do the V-blank signaling and then set a timer, and then do whatever work you want to do within the frame, and then wait for the timer so that you could still get the correct amount of lines output all the time, but then you could do varying amounts of work. And when I was thinking about doing a wireframe cube, that's what you want to do, because in certain frames you're going to draw more pixels than other frames. Yeah, I think that'd be cool, Trey. That's awesome. I'm glad the streams were inspiring. SD47IK, how's it going? Yeah, I think this kind of stuff is really fun. It takes a lot of work, and like there's a lot of lead time, and that's just how it is with old school platforms. It becomes a very different problem. Like I think the way I used to look at it is that these were really slow computers, and I don't really look at it that way anymore. I just look at it as like, these are really constrained machines, and understanding the machinery is kind of the fun part. So it's about all these fun limits. It's not an old piece of computing hardware. It's just like an interesting machine that does DMA sometimes. And if you can get it to do the right DMA at the right times and prepare the right data that it's going to read out via that DMA, you get a cool demo effect. I would say that probably sums up how I think about old school demo coding at this point. And I think that's really fun. I think the C64 was the system that got me thinking in that way the most. Just because it, unlike the VCS, which only does horizontal scan lines, the C64 hardware does horizontal lines of characters. And it doesn't do much more than that, actually. There's some additional timing stuff with the border, and the sprites are a whole other thing. But like for the main display, it's just that character. And then depending on the mode, like the graphics mode and what it's doing, that really just determines how the pointers change. And you can also, like, by changing the scroll registers, you can change different conditions for how it switches modes. So you can get it to like reread the data every scan line, or do whatever just by manipulating the scroll registers. And I think that that's really fun. But ultimately, understanding how it renders that one line of character data gives you a very deep understanding of how a lot of the demo effects work. Like there's this old Vic2 document from the late 90s, I believe, that goes into very great detail about the state changes and on which cycle they happen. And I think LFT did a really good diagram of like the different cycles and the different lines on which events occur. And so you can kind of, just by looking at that diagram and understanding how the hardware changes, and then how you would manipulate the scroll values to change those conditions at different times, you can create a lot of kind of different effects. Again, just by changing how when the DMA reads data and where it reads data, and then again preparing the data that's going to read. So I think that's really fun. It's a lot of stuff that the Amiga hardware does out of the box, but on C64 you have to jump through a bit of hoops to get the hardware to do that kind of thing for you. SC479IK, do you think demo scene has a future in AR VR stuff? Definitely. I mean, real time in general, like as a medium, real time generative art has a big future in AR VR, and demos are really, I guess, a subset of that. So I don't know how much of the demo scene culture would breathe into that, but I think it's all one ethos in a way. That would be cool, Trey Guy. Exploit the emulator used in the competition. Exactly, Zakor. You totally can. Do some really trippy Ray March geometry. Probably gonna fight a lot for speed, so you don't get sick though. But like I see no reason why like live coding in that environment won't work. I think that could be a really cool intersection. But again, like ray marching and that stuff isn't really the demo scene's thing. Like the demo scenes really embrace those techniques because of size limitations and also time to work on production limitations. Seems to satisfy both of those constraints pretty well. But because of the latter, like it's convenient to describe that kind of geometry implicitly, and that makes it nice for people who haven't even done graphics coding to get into this really easily, especially on platforms like ShaderToy. So I think real-time graphics coding in general seems to be getting a lot more popular over the years. Software, I think LSD is cheaper. Depends on who you ask or who's coding. Or how you measure cost. Anyway. It's been really fun hanging out with you guys, but I think I'm going to go. If you guys have any more questions or whatever you want to talk about in the next 5 minutes, fire away. Otherwise, I'm just going to head out. Do it, Evil. Make it happen. Exactly, Havoc. Thanks, cute nice. That's crazy, Aqua. Those modern accelerators are a whole other thing, which I think are cool. I think they're cool in the same way that LFT FPGA demos are cool. But they just seem such like a different thing. Demo scene used to be rather political. Think that would be back? Like we have engaged singers. Will there be engaged demo makers? I'm not really sure what that means. You mean like people that are using that medium to express political opinions? I personally feel like I haven't seen much of that. Yeah, Nosfa would be someone who's doing that a lot. And I think there's a lot of LGBTQ people in the demo scene as well. And so there's been some of like promotion of that message. But I don't think generally there's a lot of that kind of politics in demo scene. Demo scene has plenty of its own politics, just as like a subculture, its own norms and politics, like within the culture itself. That I personally notice a lot of that more than I notice politics in a broader scope. But then again, I'm also not one of the more socially active demo sceners either. Like at parties, I like to engage with people a lot, but I think most of my experience at the demo scene is actually not spent in the demo scene, if that makes sense. Like most of my interaction with it is spent during the time making productions and collaborating with the people that are closest to me, and then engaging in the demo scene as a whole. It's mostly, from my part, mostly comments on Poet, shit posting, and sometimes popping up on IRC, and then talking to people at parties. Yeah, I should be able to do the LGBTQ flag on VCS very easily. The demo scene there's a lot of really socially active people in the demo scene, mostly on IRC as far as I know. But then of course there's a lot of parties and a lot of people socializing outside of that as well. Like most of my best friends in Oslo are also demo sceners, so that kind of counts. And of course demo scene always comes up when we get together, so there's a lot of that kind of social activity as well. But I'd say like if you wanted to meet demo sceners or just talk with demo sceners, like break into that kind of scene, then like hopping on IRC is a really good way to do that. Think like Revision, which I believe is on IRCnet, might be on EFnet. I think it's on IRCnet. It's probably where most people are. And then there's the various other scenes like C64 or SNESDev or GBDev or whatever. And then of course like channels like SNESDev, which I think is on EFnet, like that stuff also overlaps. Like that's more focused on the broader SNES development scene than demo scene, but of course there's overlap. I don't know of any private demo parties. Maybe a few that happen in like cabins and stuff, but I don't know of that many. I remember a couple people popping on Poet and saying that like the demo scene needs a Discord or Poet needs a Discord, and the response I think was generally just like, well, we're all on IRC, so and that's fine. I mean, the nice thing about, for example, Discord or Slack would be that we could see messages that we missed if you didn't have your computer connected all the time, but there's both positives and negatives to that. And from what I could tell, like a lot of groups use Slack. Like Logicoma has their own Slack. And there's like a demo scene channel in like the Games Tech Slack, and I'm sure there are other Slacks that have demo scene channels as well. I think IRC is probably the biggest hub. That's a good point. Hadn't considered that it might be difficult to connect to IRC from certain machines. I really like being on IRC and talking to seniors on IRC, but I'm not on there that often, and mostly that, like, there's not really a big reason for that. It mostly just comes down to I don't have that urge a lot of the time, and I find I get really distracted, especially in the last couple of years. I've been a bit better at keeping myself focused when actually working on demos, and I'm still not good at that, but a bit better. And I tend to get really distracted when I'm on IRC because I'm having fun talking to people. So, like, it's cool, but I don't know. In a bit of a selfish way, perhaps, I think most of my demo scene endeavors kind of focus inward, and the stuff that I'm working on, it's kind of an outlet for me more than it is something I engage with a lot with other people. I think it's that way for a lot of people, but it's one of those things. It's a big culture, different things, different people. Tracy, do you still do Rust for a living? I have actually never done Rust for a living. Just mostly my personal projects. Yeah, I changed jobs in March, but no Rust professionally. But yeah, the demo scene's nice because all these kind of different kind of people can really coexist in the one scene. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out. I think I'm finally gonna go now. This was really fun, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Cool.